There was a time when leaving America was spoken about in whispers, like a strange fantasy that only a few restless people entertained. It was something people joked about when taxes went up or prices jumped again. But deep down, most still believed that no matter how frustrating things became, the United States was the best place to be. Today, that belief is cracking. Not slowly, not quietly, but all at once. More Americans than ever are leaving the country for good, not as tourists, not as short term workers, but as people who have decided they are done. And once they leave, a shocking number of them refuse to come back. What they discover outside the borders of the United States changes them permanently. And by the end of this video, you will understand why so many people are walking away from what used to be called the American dream. Hey, man, before we go any further, make sure you like the video, share it with people who need to hear this message, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell, and select all if you want more great Angry Guy content, and you want to get every single video the moment we release it. These topics are not being discussed honestly in most places, and the only way this message spreads is if people actively support it. I also want to remind you to check out Angry's Crypto Academy if you want to learn how to protect and safeguard your assets and grow your wealth. If you want to learn how to buy, sell, and trade crypto the right way, Angry's Crypto Academy is linked in the description of the video, so go check it out now while it is available. And if you are enjoying these Angry Guy videos and want to show support, you can buy me a Red Bull using the link in the description. That support directly helps keep this channel independent and moving forward. Now, let us talk about what is really happening, because the story being told in headlines does not match the reality on the ground. The idea that Americans are simply taking extended vacations or chasing novelty is outdated and inaccurate. What we are witnessing is as a quiet but accelerating exit. Families, professionals, retirees, remote workers, and even young people who were once told they had limitless opportunity are choosing to leave the United States behind. They are selling homes, downsizing possessions, and rebuilding their lives elsewhere. And once they settle into their new environments, the overwhelming majority say the same thing. They wish they had left sooner. When Americans arrive in other countries, the first thing they often notice is not something dramatic or flashy. It is something subtle but deeply unsettling in hindsight. The air feels different, not in a poetic sense, but in a literal sense. Cities feel less congested. Noise levels are lower. Streets are more walkable. People are not constantly rushing with clenched jaws and tense shoulders. There is a noticeable absence of chronic stress in everyday interactions. For many Americans, this is the first time they realize how tightly wound they have been for years, even decades, without noticing it. Then there's the food. Americans who move abroad frequently describe the same experience. They eat more but feel better. They stop gaining weight. In some cases, they lose weight without trying. They report fewer digestive issues. Meals feel simpler, fresher, and less processed. Food is not treated as an enemy or a math equation, it is just food. When they return to the United States for visits, many report feeling unwell after only a few days of eating the same products they once consumed daily. This alone is enough to make people question what they were told about modern living. Healthcare is another shock. In the United States, healthcare is often a source of anxiety, even for those who are insured. People delay appointments, they avoid procedures, they fear unexpected bills. Abroad, many Americans discover systems that prioritize access and prevention. They are able to see doctors quickly, they pay transparent and reasonable costs. In some countries, they walk into clinics without paperwork, battles, or weeks of waiting. This changes the relationship people have with their own bodies. Health stops feeling like a luxury and starts feeling like a basic part of life. Cost of living is where the illusion finally collapses for many. Americans leave believing that everything will be cheaper, but they are still stunned by how much cheaper daily life actually is. Rent, groceries, transportation, dining out, and even utilities often cost a fraction of what they paid back home. People who struggled to survive in American cities suddenly find themselves saving money while working less. Retirees who feared running out of funds discover they can live comfortably, even generously, without constant financial anxiety. This isn't about living extravagantly, it is about living without fear. What makes this trend even more unsettling is that the decline did not happen overnight. Society in the United States has been deteriorating for decades. Trust in institutions has eroded, infrastructure has aged, communities have fractured, work has become more demanding while offering less security. People were told to work harder, get more education, take on more debt, and delay life in exchange for future stability. That stability never arrived. Instead, many people reached adulthood or middle age feeling trapped, exhausted, and disillusioned. The American dream was built on a promise: work hard, play by the rules, and you will build a stable life. What many are now experiencing is the opposite: work harder, and costs rise faster than wages. Play by the rules, and the rules change without warning. Plan for the future, and the future becomes more expensive and less certain. For a growing number of Americans, this realization is not political, it is personal. It is felt in monthly bills, daily stress, and the quiet sense that something is deeply wrong. When these Americans leave and experience life elsewhere, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. They see societies that still value balance. They see cultures where people leave work on time, where family meals are normal, where children play outside, where public spaces are maintained, where people are not constantly divided and hostile. This does not mean other countries are perfect, they are not, but perfection is not the standard people are chasing anymore. Stability, dignity, and peace are. One of the most important aspects of this movement is that many who leave had no intention of doing so permanently. They left to explore, they left to reset, they left thinking they would return when once things improved. But something happens after a few months or a year. They stop counting the days until they go back. Then they stop thinking about going back at all. The idea of returning begins to feel like moving backward rather than homecoming. This is especially true for remote workers and digital professionals. Technology allowed people to detach income from geography. Once that door opened, it could not be closed again. People realized they could earn in stronger currencies while living in places with lower costs and higher quality of life. But beyond the financial advantage, they discovered something more valuable: time, time to think, time to live, time not spent commuting, stressing, or fighting systems that feel adversarial. Families report another powerful shift. Children become calmer. Education feels less competitive and more human. Parents spend more time together instead of juggling multiple jobs just to survive. Even single individuals report improved mental clarity. Anxiety fades, sleep improves, relationships become more genuine. When people describe these changes, they are not exaggerating. They are describing the absence of constant pressure that had become normalized in American life. This is why the phrase American dream no longer resonates with so many people. For them, it has transformed into an American nightmare, not because of any single event, but because of accumulated strain. High cost, constant uncertainty, endless work, social fragmentation, and perhaps most importantly, the feeling that the system no longer serves ordinary people. When individuals realize they can step outside of that system and immediately feel relief, the decision becomes obvious. Critics often respond by accusing those who leave of abandoning responsibility or lacking gratitude. But this misses the point entirely. People are not leaving because they hate their country. Many leave because they loved what it was supposed to represent. They leave because they tried to make it work. They leave because they stayed longer than they should have. Walking away is not betrayal. For many, it is survival. Another important truth is that once people leave, they talk to others. Stories spread, videos circulate, Friends ask questions. Curiosity replaces disbelief. This creates a feedback loop. The more people leave and share their experiences, the more others realize they have options. The idea that leaving is extreme starts to fade. It becomes just another choice. And once something becomes a choice, it becomes powerful. Governments and institutions are aware of this shift, even if they rarely address it honestly. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Population decline, workforce shortages, and capital outflows are real concerns. But addressing them would require acknowledging uncomfortable truths about quality of life, affordability, and social trust. Instead, many narratives focus on surface level optimism while ignoring the underlying reasons people are leaving. That strategy works only until lived experience contradicts it. For those watching this video, the question is not whether everyone should leave. That is not the message. The message is that people are leaving because they can, because they are allowed to, and because staying no longer feels like the best option. This realization alone changes the balance of power between individuals and systems. When people understand that they are not trapped, everything shifts. We are entering a period where mobility matters more than loyalty, where adaptability matters more than tradition, where people are choosing environments that support their well being rather than drain it. It's not a temporary trend, it is a structural change. And it aligns with a broader pattern we've discussed many times on this channel. People are opting out of systems that no longer serve them. As people begin to seriously consider leaving, the biggest obstacle they face is not logistics, money, or paperwork. It is psychological gravity. America is not just a place, it is an identity that has been reinforced since childhood. From school lessons to movies to cultural narratives, people are taught that success looks a certain way and that success happens in a certain place. Leaving feels like admitting failure, even when the facts say otherwise. This internal conflict keeps many people stuck longer than they should be, even as their quality of life continues to erode. What often breaks that mental barrier is exposure. One conversation, one trip, one honest story from someone who already left. Suddenly, the idea shifts from impossible to imaginable. And once something becomes imaginable, it starts to feel achievable. People begin researching visas late at night. They start watching videos from expatriates. They quietly compare costs of living. They ask themselves questions they were never encouraged to ask before. Why am I working this hard just to stay afloat? Why does everything feel like a fight? Why does life feel easier elsewhere? Those who take the leap frequently describe a strange sense of calm once the decision is made. Even before they leave, the weight begins to lift. There is relief in knowing there is an exit. That relief alone exposes how trapped people felt without realizing it. It also reveals how much stress had been normalized. Stress that was framed as ambition, stress that was framed as responsibility, stress that was framed as adulthood. When Americans arrive in their new countries, the adjustment period is real, but it is rarely as difficult as they expected. Language barriers can be managed. Cultural differences become interesting rather than threatening. Bureaucracy exists everywhere, but it often feels less hostile. People report being treated more like humans and less like account numbers. That alone reshapes how they view institutions and authority. Another pattern emerges quickly. People begin reclaiming agency over their lives. They choose where to live based on lifestyle rather than prestige. They choose work that fits into life instead of life bending around work. They stop measuring success by square footage or job titles and start measuring it by peace, time, and health. This shift does not happen overnight, but once it starts, It accelerates. The United States trained people to chase endlessly. Bigger homes, faster careers, higher status. What many discover abroad is that endless chasing is not required for a good life. In many cultures, stability is the goal, not constant escalation. People are not praised for burning out. They are not admired for working themselves into exhaustion. They are respected for balance, competence, and consistency. This reframes what it means to succeed. One of the most revealing changes happens in how people interact with others. Social interactions feel less transactional. Conversations are slower. Eye contact lasts longer. People are not constantly multitasking. This may sound small, but it has a cumulative effect on mental health. Humans are not meant to live in constant competition and comparison. When that pressure eases, personality returns, humor returns, curiosity returns. This is especially noticeable among men who leave the United States. Many report feeling less judged and less constrained by rigid expectations. They are not constantly measured by income status or productivity. Masculinity becomes quieter and more grounded. Respect is earned through behavior, not branding. This shift is deeply liberating for those who felt boxed in by narrow definitions of worth. Women who leave report different but equally powerful changes. Safety improves. Daily interactions feel less charged. The pace of life allows for presence instead of constant vigilance. Again, this does not mean every place is perfect. It means that many Americans did not realize how tense their baseline had become until it disappeared. Another major realization is how much of American stress is artificially induced. Advertising, social pressure, and cultural narratives constantly push urgency and dissatisfaction. Abroad, that noise fades. People buy less because they feel less compelled to fill emotional gaps with consumption. They spend less time proving themselves and more time living. This is not accidental, it is structural. As people settle into their new lives, their relationship with money changes dramatically. Money stops being the primary source of anxiety. It becomes a tool rather than a threat. People budget differently. They save more without obsessing. They plan longer term. This financial breathing room creates space for creativity, learning, and exploration. Many people start businesses, write, study, or pursue interests they abandoned years earlier. This is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable for institutions that rely on compliance. When people realize they can live well with less stress and less consumption, entire economic assumptions break down. Systems built on debt, overwork, and dependency lose leverage. Individuals become harder to control when they are not constantly afraid. This ties directly into a broader pattern of opting out. People are not just leaving a country, they are leaving a mindset. They are leaving a story that no longer makes sense. The story that says suffering is noble, the story that says exhaustion equals virtue, the story that says stability must be earned through sacrifice without end. Many who leave say they finally understand what life is supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not easy, but reasonable, predictable, humane. That realization is irreversible. Once you know life can feel this way, it becomes impossible to justify returning to constant strain. Of course, not everyone who leaves finds immediate happiness. There are challenges. Loneliness can appear, nostalgia surfaces. But even those who struggle often say they would rather face new challenges than return to old ones that felt unsolvable. This distinction matters. Growth challenges feel different than survival stress. One expands you, the other grinds you down. An interesting side effect of this movement is how it changes conversations back home. People who leave stop engaging in constant outrage cycles. They stop being consumed by daily drama. Their perspective widens. They speak differently. This often creates distance between them and those who stayed, not because of superiority, but because their emotional bandwidth has shifted. This distance can be misinterpreted as indifference. In reality, it is often clarity. People who leave care deeply, but they refuse to be emotionally drained by systems they no longer live under. They become observers rather than participants. This detachment is often what allows them to build stable, meaningful lives elsewhere. Another factor driving permanent departure is the realization that returning often means regression. Returning means higher costs, higher stress, and lower quality of life. Even short visits confirm this. People notice how loud everything feels, how rushed everyone is, how tense interactions are. What once felt normal now feels overwhelming. This is not because the United States suddenly changed, it is because perspective changed. And perspective is dangerous to systems that depend on unquestioned participation. For younger Americans, the calculus is even clearer. Many do not see a path to home ownership, financial security, or work life balance in the United States. They see rising costs and shrinking opportunities. They see older generations struggling despite decades of effort. Leaving becomes a rational choice, not a rebellious one. This generational aspect cannot be ignored. When young people leave permanently, they take future labor, creativity, and innovation with them. This is already happening. Remote work accelerated it, social media normalized it. The idea that you must stay where you were born is losing relevance rapidly. What we are witnessing is a redistribution of people based on quality of life rather than nationalism. This is a profound shift. Borders still matter, but they matter differently. People are voting with their feet, quietly and decisively. As this continues, the narrative will attempt to shift. There will be stories minimizing the trend. There will be claims that those who leave are unhappy or unsuccessful. This is predictable. But lived experience continues to contradict these narratives. And lived experience spreads faster than official messaging. So, Tarina, the question many people ask privately is not should I leave, but could I? That question alone changes behavior. People save differently, they invest differently, they educate themselves differently, they maintain optionality. Optionality is power. And power is what many people felt they lost without realizing it. This ties back to everything this channel discusses: independence, agency, walking away from systems that no longer serve you. Whether that is financial systems, social expectations, or geographic constraints, the pattern is the same. People are reclaiming choice. And as we move forward, we need to talk about what this means long term. What happens when enough people opt out? What happens to institutions built on participation? What happens to narratives built on inevitability? These are not abstract questions anymore. They are unfolding in real time. When people step back and look at the United States from the outside, one of the most striking realizations is how much of daily life back home is built around pressure rather than purpose. Pressure to earn more, pressure to consume more, pressure to compete endlessly. From the inside, this pressure feels normal because everyone is subject to it. From the outside, it looks unnatural and exhausting. This shift in perspective is often what cements the decision not to return. Many Americans abroad describe a moment of clarity that arrives unexpectedly. It might happen while sitting in a small cafe on a weekday afternoon, watching people talk without rushing. It might happen while walking through a city where public transport simply works without drama. It might happen when a routine medical visit ends without financial anxiety. In that moment, people realize how much energy they were spending just to function in the United States. They were not failing. The environment was demanding something unreasonable. This realization often comes with grief. People grieve the version of America they believed in. They grieve the promises they were raised on. They grieve the effort they poured into a system that did not reciprocate. But grief is followed by acceptance. Acceptance that staying loyal to a story, that no longer matches reality is not virtue, it is self harm. Another factor that pushes people away permanently is unpredictability. In the United States, small disruptions can spiral into major crises. A medical issue can become a financial disaster. A job loss can threaten housing. A minor mistake can follow someone for years. Abroad, many Americans experience systems designed to absorb shocks rather than amplify them. This does not eliminate hardship, but it makes life more resilient. Resilience is a word often used abstractly, but people feel it physically when they live in systems that prioritize stability. They sleep better. Their nervous systems calm down. They stop bracing for impact. Over time, this becomes the new baseline. Returning to constant alertness feels unbearable. People also begin to notice how much American culture revolves around fear: fear of falling behind, fear of losing status, fear of being judged, fear of making the wrong choice. This fear is profitable. It drives consumption, it drives compliance, it drives silence. When people step outside of that environment, the fear loosens its grip. And once fear loses power, clarity follows. Clarity changes priorities. People stop chasing symbols and start building substance. They invest in relationships, they invest in skills, they invest in health. These investments compound quietly but profoundly. Years later, people look back and realize they built lives rather than resumes. One of the most misunderstood aspects of leaving is the assumption that people are running away. In reality, many are running toward something, toward coherence, toward alignment, toward environments that support rather than undermine human needs. This distinction matters because it reframes the entire movement. Those who leave often become more engaged with life, not less. They learn languages, they adapt to new customs. They expand their worldview. They develop humility and curiosity. They become more interesting people because they are no longer confined to a single narrative. This expansion is particularly powerful for those who felt invisible or undervalued in the United States. Abroad, identity is often less rigid. People are not constantly sorted into categories, they are seen as individuals. This can be deeply healing for those who felt reduced to labels back home. Another layer to this story is how technology interacts with geography. The digital age broke the monopoly that location once had on opportunity. When income, education, and communication are no longer tied to a specific place, people naturally optimize for quality of life. This is not ideological, it is practical. As more people make this optimization, the cultural narrative struggles to keep up. Old assumptions about loyalty, success, and belonging start to crumble. People realize they can appreciate their origins without being trapped by them. They can care without sacrificing themselves. This creates tension with those who stayed behind. Some view those who leave as abandoning ship. Others feel envy. Others feel confusion. This tension is natural. Change always creates friction. But over time, as leaving becomes more common, the stigma fades. We are already seeing this normalization. Online communities of expatriates grow daily. Information is shared freely. Mistakes are documented. Paths are mapped. What once felt risky now feels manageable. This lowers the barrier further. Momentum builds. Governments in destination countries are responding as well. Some actively court expatriates. They streamline visas. They promote remote work incentives. They recognize the value of attracting people who bring income without burdening local labor markets. This global competition for people is new, and it favors individuals willing to move. Meanwhile, those who remain in high cost, high stress environments are often told to endure, to adapt, to be patient. But patience without progress breeds resentment. When people see others improving their lives simply by changing location, endurance stops feeling noble. This does not mean everyone should leave. It means everyone should be honest about why they stay. Staying should be a choice, not an assumption. When staying is chosen consciously, it can be meaningful. When it is chosen by default, it can become a trap. One of the most powerful shifts for those who leave is reclaiming authorship of their lives. They stop outsourcing decisions to systems. They stop waiting for permission. They realize that responsibility does not mean submission, it means ownership. Ownership is uncomfortable at first. There is no script, there is no guarantee. But there is also no ceiling imposed by geography. This trade off is one many find worth making. And over time, people who leave develop a different relationship with uncertainty. They become more adaptable. They trust themselves more. They stop expecting institutions to save them. This self trust is transformative. It spills into every area of life. This is why returning becomes less appealing. Returning often means surrendering that autonomy. It means re entering systems that expect compliance rather than competence. For those who have tasted independence, that is a hard sell. Another reality is that many who leave find deeper community abroad than they ever had at home. Smaller social circles, stronger bonds, shared experiences. When people are not constantly exhausted, they have more to give. Community becomes organic rather than forced. This challenges the assumption that America offers the strongest social fabric. For many, the opposite is true. Fragmentation, isolation, and distrust have eroded connection. Abroad, slower pace and shared public life rebuild it. This is not nostalgia, it is lived experience repeated across thousands of stories. The consistency of these reports is what makes them impossible to dismiss. As this movement grows, it forces a reckoning, not just for governments, but for individuals. People must ask themselves what they are optimizing for: status or peace, convenience or freedom, familiarity or growth. These are not easy questions, but they are unavoidable now. The option to leave exists, the evidence is visible. Ignoring it becomes a conscious choice. This is why conversations like this matter. They are not about telling people what to do, they are about revealing what is possible. Possibility is threatening to systems built on inevitability. When people realize they have options, they behave differently, even if they never leave. They negotiate harder, they save more aggressively, they detach emotionally from narratives that no longer serve them. This alone shifts power dynamics. In that sense, the act of leaving is only one expression of a larger movement. The movement is about reclaiming agency. Geography is just one battlefield. As this movement accelerates, something else becomes impossible to ignore, and that is how strongly the United States relies on inertia. The system functions best when people stay where they are, accept what is given, and internalize the idea that alternatives are unrealistic. Once inertia breaks, the leverage shifts. People who leave are not just changing addresses, they are breaking psychological contracts they never consciously signed. And when those contracts break, the entire structure feels less solid. One of the most revealing things expatriates notice is how different responsibility feels outside the United States. Responsibility is not framed as endless sacrifice or moral obligation to grind without rest. It is framed as stewardship of one's own life. You are expected to be competent, respectful, and self directed, but you are not expected to destroy yourself to prove worth. This difference reshapes how people view adulthood itself. In the United States, adulthood often feels like a narrowing corridor. Options close, risks become dangerous, failure becomes catastrophic. Abroad, adulthood often feels more elastic. People change careers later in life without stigma. They relocate without judgment. They prioritize well being without being accused of laziness. This elasticity creates resilience that rigid systems lack. Another realization that cements permanent departure is how little drama dominates daily life elsewhere. News cycles exist everywhere, but they do not dominate conversations to the same degree. People are less emotionally hijacked by constant outrage. This reduces anxiety dramatically. When your nervous system is not constantly activated, you think more clearly. Clear thinking leads to better decisions. This clarity also exposes how much American culture monetizes attention and conflict. From media to politics to social platforms, outrage is rewarded, fear is amplified, calm is ignored. When people step outside that environment, the silence is initially unsettling. Then it becomes addictive. Peace becomes a non negotiable standard rather than a luxury. Many expatriates describe a point where they realize they are no longer angry all the time. They did not realize how much low level anger they carried until it was gone. This anger was not personal, it was environmental. It came from constantly navigating systems that felt adversarial. When those systems are removed, the anger dissipates. This emotional shift is critical because it changes how people relate to others. Without constant stress, empathy returns, patience returns. People listen more. This leads to healthier relationships and fewer conflicts. Life becomes less reactive and more intentional. Another factor driving permanent exit is how the United States handles failure. Failure is often punished harshly and publicly. Mistakes linger. Recovery is slow and expensive. Abroad, failure is often treated as part of the process. This does not mean consequences do not exist. It means people are not permanently defined by missteps. This creates a culture of experimentation rather than paralysis. For entrepreneurs, creatives, and independent thinkers, this difference is enormous. It allows people to try again without being crushed. It encourages initiative rather than fear. Over time, this fosters innovation that is grounded rather than frantic. The longer people stay abroad, the more they notice how much American life revolves around proving value rather than experiencing it. Productivity becomes identity. Busyness becomes status. Rest becomes suspicious. Abroad, rest is normalized. Leisure is not something you earn after suffering, it is part of a healthy life. This reframing has profound consequences. People stop feeling guilty for enjoying their lives. They stop apologizing for prioritizing health. They stop internalizing the idea that worth must be justified through exhaustion. This internal liberation often matters more than any external benefit. And another uncomfortable truth people confront is how isolated American life can be despite constant connectivity. Suburban sprawl, long commutes, and private spaces reduce organic interaction. Abroad, density and walkability create spontaneous social contact. This does not mean forced intimacy. It means opportunity for connection exists by default. Humans are social by nature. When environments facilitate connection, mental health improves. When environments isolate, loneliness increases even among crowds. Many Americans did not realize how isolated they felt until they experienced daily casual interaction again. This is why people who leave often say they feel more human, not more successful, not more important, more human. That distinction is critical. As these stories accumulate, they create cognitive dissonance for those still inside the system. If leaving leads to better health, lower stress, stronger community, and financial stability, why is it framed as irresponsible? Why is it discouraged? Why is it rarely discussed honestly? The answer is uncomfortable. Systems that depend on participation discourage exit. They frame endurance as virtue. They moralize sacrifice. They pathologize alternatives. This is not unique to the United States, but the scale is notable. Once people see this pattern, they cannot unsee it. They begin questioning other narratives they accepted without scrutiny about work, about success, about identity, about obligation. This questioning is contagious. This is where the conversation intersects with the broader theme of walking away. Walking away does not mean disengaging from life, it means disengaging from structures that extract without giving back. Geography is one of those structures. As more people leave, the idea of permanence changes. People stop asking where they will live forever and start asking where they will live next. This mindset values adaptability over attachment. It reduces fear of change. It increases confidence. And confidence built on adaptability is different from confidence built on status. It does not collapse when circumstances shift, it grows stronger. This is why people who leave often appear calmer and more grounded, even when facing uncertainty. Another critical shift happens in how people view time. In the United States, time is constantly scarce, rushed, fragmented, monetized. Abroad, time feels slower even when life is busy. This perception alone improves well being. When time feels abundant, stress decreases. This abundance of time allows people to think long term again. They plan, they reflect, they invest in skills that compound. They stop chasing short term relief and start building durable lives. Durability is the key word. Many Americans realize their lives back home were fragile, one shock away from crisis. Abroad, they build buffers financial, emotional, social. This resilience becomes deeply valued. Returning to fragility after building resilience feels irresponsible. This is why so many refuse to come back, even when offered incentives. No amount of familiarity compensates for loss of stability. Another layer of this story is how children raised abroad differ. Parents report calmer behavior, less pressure, more curiosity. Education feels less adversarial. Childhood feels longer. This alone convinces many families never to return. Parents begin asking themselves why they would voluntarily place their children back into environments defined by pressure and competition when alternatives exist. That question is hard to answer, honestly. As these families build roots abroad, return becomes increasingly unlikely. Networks form, friendships deepen, lives intertwine. The idea of uprooting again becomes unnecessary. From the outside, this looks like brain drain. From the inside, it feels like relief. People are not leaving to exploit other countries, they are leaving to live. This is why moral arguments against leaving fail. People are not abandoning responsibility, they are exercising it. Responsibility to themselves, responsibility to their families, responsibility to their futures. As we look ahead, the implications are enormous. Labor markets shift, tax bases shrink, cultural narratives weaken. But the most profound change is psychological. The belief that there is only one place to succeed dies quietly. When that belief dies, people become harder to control through fear. They become harder to manipulate through scarcity. They become harder to shame into compliance. This is the real reason the trend matters. And again, this is not about encouraging everyone to leave. It is about understanding why leaving has become attractive. That understanding exposes systemic failures that cannot be ignored. For those still inside the United States, awareness alone can improve life. Knowing you have options reduces desperation. Desperation is what systems rely on most. As this awareness spreads, expect resistance, expect dismissals, expect minimization. These are signs that something important is shifting. When people are not always being measured, they take more creative risks. They speak more honestly. They experiment without fear of permanent damage. Over time, this cultivates confidence rooted in capability rather than approval. That confidence is quieter, but far more stable. It does not require applause to survive. Another realization that solidifies the decision to stay abroad is how differently societies treat public goods. Infrastructure is not treated as an afterthought. Public spaces are maintained, transportation is reliable, parks are used, streets are designed for people rather than just vehicles. These details create an environment that supports daily life instead of complicating it. In the United States, individuals are expected to compensate for systemic shortcomings. You buy larger vehicles to survive poor infrastructure. You purchase private services to replace public ones. You absorb inefficiencies as personal burdens. Abroad, many Americans realize how much of their energy was spent patching holes in the system. When those holes are absent, life feels lighter. This lightness reveals how much American life trains people to accept inconvenience as normal. Long lines, complex paperwork, hidden fees, fragmented services. People adapt because they have to, but adaptation is not the same as flourishing. Once people experience systems that simply work, tolerance for dysfunction evaporates. This intolerance is not entitlement, it is clarity. Clarity about what is reasonable, clarity about what is necessary, clarity about what should not be normalized. Another subtle but powerful change happens in how people experience dignity. Abroad, many Americans report feeling respected as default, not because of status or income, but because respect is culturally embedded. Interactions feel less adversarial. Customer service is not performative, but functional. Authority figures are approachable rather than intimidating. This baseline respect reduces friction everywhere. Small interactions do not escalate. Conflict de escalates faster. Life becomes smoother not because people are perfect, but because systems are designed with human behavior in mind. This design philosophy stands in contrast to environments that assume bad faith. When systems assume people will cheat, exploit, or fail, they become rigid and punitive. When systems assume competence and cooperation, they become flexible and resilient. Living inside one versus the other changes how people see themselves. Many expatriates realize they had internalized distrust without noticing: distrust of institutions, distrust of strangers, distrust of outcomes. When they move into environments built on trust, that internal tension unwinds. They stop bracing for conflict. This has measurable effects on health and longevity. Another critical factor is how aging is treated. In the United States, aging is often framed as decline and burden. Abroad, aging is integrated into community life. Older people are visible, active, and valued. This changes how people think about their own futures. They stop fearing aging and start planning for it. Planning replaces anxiety. When people can envision a stable future, they invest accordingly. They make decisions that prioritize long term well being over short term survival. This shift alone alters life trajectories. The longer people remain abroad, the more they notice how much American culture prioritizes urgency over importance. Everything is framed as immediate, everything is a crisis. This constant urgency fragments attention and drains energy. Abroad, urgency exists, but it is contextual. Not everything demands immediate reaction. This allows people to focus on what truly matters. Focus improves quality of work and quality of life. People do fewer things better. They stop multitasking as identity. They experience depth again. Depth in conversations, depth in relationships, depth in thought. This depth exposes another uncomfortable truth. Many Americans were not overworked because work was meaningful. They were overworked because systems were inefficient. When inefficiency is removed, work becomes more humane without sacrificing productivity. This realization challenges deeply held beliefs about effort and reward. It reveals that suffering is not a prerequisite for value. It also reveals that many systems benefit from convincing people otherwise. As expatriates integrate further, they often stop consuming American media entirely, not out of rejection, but because it no longer resonates. The constant tone of conflict feels distant. The narratives feel exaggerated. This detachment further reduces emotional volatility. Reduced volatility leads to better decision making. People are less reactive. They think strategically. They plan. This strategic mindset compounds over time, creating stability that is difficult to replicate in chaotic environments. Another major shift is how people relate to authority. Abroad, authority is often more localized and accessible. Problems are solved closer to where they occur. This reduces feelings of powerlessness. People feel they can influence their surroundings rather than being subjected to distant decisions. This sense of agency is addictive. Once people experience it, returning to environments where decisions feel imposed becomes intolerable. Agency is not a luxury, it is a psychological necessity. As more people leave, the question shifts from why are they leaving to why are others staying? For many, the answer is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of losing identity, fear of judgment. These fears are understandable, but they are also revealing. Fear thrives in environments that discourage exploration. When people step outside those environments, fear loses credibility. Experience replaces speculation. Confidence replaces doubt. This is why stories from expatriates matter so much. They turn abstract fear into concrete examples. They show that life does not end when you leave. For many, it begins. Another layer of this movement is how it intersects with financial independence. People who leave often restructure their finances. They reduce debt, they lower fixed costs, they increase flexibility. This financial redesign creates optionality that is impossible under high cost structures. Optionality is freedom, freedom to say no, freedom to walk away, freedom to choose. Systems that rely on compliance fear optionality more than anything else. This is why conversations about leaving are often discouraged or trivialized, not because they are invalid, but because they threaten leverage. As optionality spreads, individuals become harder to exploit. They do not accept poor conditions because they have alternatives. This raises standards organically. Systems must improve or lose participants. This is the silent pressure being applied right now. It is not protest, it is exit. Exit is the most effective form of feedback. The long term implications are profound. Countries that offer stability, affordability, and dignity attract people. Those that rely on inertia lose them. This competition benefits individuals willing to move. It also forces a reevaluation of loyalty. Loyalty without reciprocity becomes submission. People are learning to distinguish between the two. This learning extends beyond geography. It applies to careers, relationships, and institutions. Walking away becomes a legitimate strategy rather than a last resort. As this mindset spreads, expect cultural shifts, expect new norms, expect resistance from those invested in the old order. Change rarely arrives quietly, but the direction is clear. People are prioritizing quality of life over symbolic success. They are choosing environments that align with human needs rather than abstract ideals. For those still undecided, the most important takeaway is not that you must leave, but that you should question assumptions. Assumptions shape behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. Ask yourself what you are optimizing for. Ask yourself whether your environment supports that goal. Ask yourself what you would choose if fear were removed from the equation. These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Ignoring them does not make them disappear. It only delays the reckoning. As this awareness deepens, another pattern becomes clear. And that is how differently risk is distributed in the United States compared to many other countries. In America, risk is heavily individualized. You carry the consequences of systemic failures personally. Medical costs, housing instability, education debt, and employment volatility are framed as personal responsibility issues even when they are structural. Abroad, risk is more evenly absorbed. Systems are designed to cushion impact rather than magnify it. This difference alone reshapes how people choose experience daily life. When risk is individualized, people become cautious in unhealthy ways. They avoid innovation. They avoid honesty. They avoid rest. Every decision feels loaded because the downside is severe. When risk is shared, people are willing to engage. They try new paths. They speak openly. They recover faster from setbacks. Over time, this creates healthier societies and healthier individuals. Americans who leave often describe a moment where they realize how much fear governed their choices back home. Not dramatic fear, but background fear. Fear of getting sick, fear of losing income, fear of making a wrong move. This fear was normalized as prudence. Abroad, when that fear fades, people recognize how constricted their lives had become. This recognition is often followed by anger, not outward anger, but inward realization. Anger at how much life was deferred, anger at how much energy was wasted managing anxiety. But that anger usually transforms into resolve. Resolve to live differently, resolve not to return to a state of constant vigilance. Another aspect that locks in permanent departure is how differently success is defined. In the United States, success is often external and comparative. More than others, better than others, ahead of others. Abroad, success is often internal and contextual. Enough for your needs, balance in your life, stability over time. This shift reduces competition and increases contentment. Contentment is frequently misunderstood. It is not complacency, it is alignment. When people are aligned with their environment, effort feels purposeful rather than draining. This alignment is what many Americans discover only after leaving. As alignment increases, people stop seeking validation through consumption. They buy fewer things. They choose quality over quantity. They invest in experiences rather than symbols. This reduces financial pressure and increases satisfaction simultaneously. It is a positive feedback loop. This loop exposes how consumption driven American culture relies on dissatisfaction. People are encouraged to feel incomplete, so they will buy solutions. When people leave that environment, dissatisfaction loses fuel. Needs become clear. Wants become optional. Financial stress drops accordingly. Another significant shift occurs in how people experience privacy. In the United States, privacy is paradoxical. Surveillance is widespread, yet people feel exposed rather than protected. Abroad, privacy often feels more respected in daily life. Less data extraction, less aggressive monitoring, less constant selling. This reduces cognitive load. Cognitive load matters more than people realize. Constant decision making, constant alerts, constant demands fragment attention. When these pressures ease, mental clarity improves. People think more deeply, they plan more effectively, they become less impulsive. This clarity often leads people to reassess relationships. They recognize which connections were built on proximity rather than substance. Abroad, relationships tend to be fewer, but deeper. This depth provides emotional stability that large but shallow networks cannot. Another reason people refuse to return is how education is experienced. Adults abroad often continue learning without pressure. Education is integrated into life rather than treated as a credential race. This lifelong learning culture keeps minds engaged without burnout. Parents notice this difference acutely. Children are encouraged to explore rather than perform. Curiosity is valued. Mistakes are treated as learning rather than failure. This reduces anxiety and builds confidence. Parents ask themselves why they would return to systems that undermine these qualities. As families build routines abroad, the idea of uprooting again becomes less appealing. Roots form not just in place, but in rhythm. Daily walks, familiar faces, trusted services. These rhythms create belonging more effectively than slogans or symbols. Belonging is another concept that shifts meaning after leaving. In the United States, belonging is often conditional. It depends on conformity, success, or identity alignment. Abroad, belonging is often based on participation and respect. You belong because you show up and contribute. This inclusivity fosters stability. This stability makes long term planning possible. People buy homes without fear of being trapped. They start businesses without fear of total collapse. They plan families without fear of financial ruin. These decisions compound into fulfilling lives. Returning to environments where long term planning feels risky becomes increasingly unattractive. People do not want to trade stability for nostalgia. Another factor reinforcing permanent exit is how conflict is handled. In the United States, conflict often escalates quickly. Everything becomes polarized. Abroad, conflict is more contained. Disagreements exist without becoming identity wars. This reduces emotional exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion is one of the most underdiscussed drivers of exit. People leave not because of one big problem, but because of constant emotional drain. When that drain stops, life feels manageable again. This manageability allows people to engage with issues thoughtfully rather than reactively. They regain perspective. They stop feeling like everything is at stake all the time. This emotional regulation improves health and relationships. Another realization people have is how much American work culture glorifies overextension. Being busy is treated as virtue, saying no is treated as weakness. Abroad, boundaries are respected, time off is normal. This normalcy prevents burnout before it starts. Preventing burnout is far easier than recovering from it. People who leave often realize they were already burned out without acknowledging it. Recovery happens gradually, but once recovered, they protect it fiercely. This protection of well being becomes a guiding principle. Decisions are filtered through a simple question: does this support the life I am building? If not, it is declined. This clarity simplifies life dramatically. As clarity spreads, people stop waiting for permission. They stop waiting for systems to improve. They take responsibility for their own outcomes. This responsibility is empowering rather than burdensome because it comes with choice. Choice is the core theme underlying this entire movement: the choice to stay, the choice to leave, the choice to design life intentionally. Once people realize choice exists, they cannot return to unconscious participation. This awareness also changes how people engage with politics and culture. They become less reactive and more strategic. They stop internalizing narratives meant to provoke rather than inform. This detachment protects mental health. Detachment does not mean apathy, it means selectivity. People choose where to invest attention and energy. This selectivity increases impact and reduces stress. As more people adopt this mindset, social norms shift, conversations change, aspirations change. The idea that you must endure indefinitely loses credibility. Alternatives become visible. This visibility is what accelerates the trend. People need proof, stories provide proof. Each person who leaves becomes a data point. Each successful transition reduces fear. Fear thrives on uncertainty. Experience dissolves it. As we look toward the future, it is clear that this movement will continue reshaping expectations. Employers adapt, governments respond, individuals reposition. The world becomes more fluid. Fluidity rewards those who are adaptable and informed. It punishes rigidity and denial. This is not moral judgment, it is structural reality. For those watching, the most important lesson is not to copy anyone else's path, but to recognize that paths exist. Once you know that, you can evaluate your own circumstances honestly. Ask yourself whether your environment aligns with your values. Ask yourself whether it supports the life you want to live. Ask yourself what you are trading away by staying. These questions are not easy, but they are necessary. Avoiding them does not protect you, it only delays choice until circumstances force it. As everything we have discussed comes together, one truth becomes unavoidable, and that is that this movement is not primarily about countries, borders, or even economics. It is about agency. People are not leaving because they want novelty or escape. They are leaving because they want control over the direction of their lives. When environments stop offering that control, people search elsewhere. When they find it, they do not give it up easily. This is why the phrase refusing to come back is so important. It signals finality, not bitterness, not anger, resolution. People who leave and build stable lives abroad are not waiting for permission to return. They are not monitoring headlines, hoping things improve enough to justify going back. They are living, and once life begins to feel coherent, the desire to re enter chaos disappears. The United States still offers opportunity, but opportunity alone is no longer enough. Opportunity without stability becomes a gamble. Opportunity without dignity becomes extraction. Opportunity without quality of life becomes a trap. People are recalibrating what opportunity actually means, and that recalibration is changing behavior at scale. One of the most powerful shifts for those who leave is how they experience freedom, not the abstract idea of freedom, but the lived version. Freedom from constant financial strain, freedom from relentless pressure, freedom from narratives that define worth narrowly. This freedom does not come from lack of responsibility. It comes from alignment between effort and reward. Alignment is what many Americans were missing without realizing it. They worked hard, followed rules, delayed gratification, and still felt behind. Abroad, many discover that effort leads to proportionate outcomes. This proportionality restores trust in life itself. When people trust that effort matters, motivation returns naturally. This trust also changes how people view the future. Instead of fearing decline, they plan growth. Instead of bracing for impact, they build resilience. Instead of chasing escape, they cultivate roots. These roots are not tied to nationality, they are tied to lived experience. Another realization that marks the end of the journey is that identity becomes internal rather than imposed. People stop defining themselves by systems they participate in. They define themselves by values, skills, and relationships. This internal identity is portable. It travels well, it adapts, it does not depend on approval. When identity becomes portable, fear of change diminishes. People realize they carry their value with them. This realization alone is liberating. It removes the sense of being trapped by circumstances. This is why walking away becomes possible. Walking away is not abandonment. It is boundary setting. It is the recognition that participation should be voluntary, not coerced. When participation stops being mutually beneficial, exit becomes rational. This logic applies everywhere to careers that demand endless sacrifice without security, to cultures that reward burnout, to systems that ask for loyalty while offering instability. Geography is simply one of the most visible expressions of this logic. As more people adopt this mindset, the collective story changes. Success stops being about endurance, it becomes about sustainability. People stop glorifying suffering, they start valuing well being. This shift does not happen overnight, but it is already underway. The resistance to this shift will be loud. Narratives will attempt to reframe leaving as failure or weakness, but those narratives lose power when contradicted by lived experience. People trust what they see in their own lives and in the lives of those they know. This is why storytelling matters. Not sensational stories, honest ones. Stories about quieter mornings, about affordable lives, about regained health, about relationships that flourish when stress recedes. These stories dismantle fear more effectively than arguments ever could. At its core, this movement is about opting out of unnecessary suffering. It is about questioning why certain hardships are treated as inevitable when alternatives exist. It is about refusing to normalize dysfunction. And for those who choose to stay, awareness still matters. Knowing that alternatives exist empowers better decisions. It encourages negotiation. It encourages preparation. It encourages independence. Staying becomes a choice rather than an obligation. Choice is the dividing line between empowerment and resignation. When people feel they have no choice, resentment grows. When people recognize choice, responsibility follows. That responsibility is not burdensome. It is clarifying. This clarity is what many Americans discover only after leaving, but it does not require leaving to begin. It requires questioning assumptions. It requires evaluating environments honestly. It requires courage to imagine different outcomes. The future will belong to those who can move physically, mentally, and strategically. Not everyone will relocate, but everyone will be affected by this shift. Systems will adapt or shrink, individuals will reposition, old certainties will fade. In this environment, the most valuable skill is discernment, knowing when to endure and when to exit, knowing when loyalty is reciprocal and when it is exploitative, knowing when to invest and when to walk away. Walking away is not giving up. It is choosing differently. It is recognizing that your life is finite and valuable. It is deciding not to spend it trapped in narratives that no longer align with reality. This channel has always been about seeing clearly and acting intentionally, about recognizing patterns early rather than reacting late, about understanding that systems do not change out of kindness, they change under pressure. Exit is pressure. When enough people walk away, standards rise, conditions improve, power shifts. This is not rebellion. It is market behavior applied to life itself. As you think about everything we have covered, ask yourself what walking away might mean for you. It might mean leaving a place. It might mean leaving a mindset. It might mean leaving expectations that no longer serve you. Walking away does not require anger. It requires honesty, honesty about what you are trading, honesty about what you are gaining, honesty about what you are willing to accept. For many Americans who have already left, that honesty led them to a better life. Not perfect, not effortless, but stable, humane, and sustainable. And once they found that, they refused to give it up. That is why they are not coming back. Before we close, I want to ask you directly what you thought about everything we discussed in this video. Do you agree with what you're seeing? Do you feel the same pressures? Are you considering options you once dismissed? Leave a comment and share your thoughts because these conversations help others realize they are not alone. And with that, like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.